Hello and welcome to another edition of Political Insider. I'm your host, Herald-Tribune political editor Zach Anderson. With me today is New College of Florida political science professor Frank Alcock. Professor Alcock, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back.
Always good to see you. The big news this week was the New Hampshire primary results. Donald Trump on the Republican side, Bernie Sanders winning on the Democratic side. We expected this based on the polling going into this, but isn't it still kind of remarkable that these two candidates who were considered fringe candidates at the beginning of this election cycle, who were real outsiders, nobody gave much of a chance, kind of long shots, and now they're really in the spotlight, center stage, front runners for their nominations right now?
Well, absolutely, it's a surprise. If you pull the lens back far enough, I don't think anybody thought when this all started that these two candidates would be where they are at the moment. It's less of a surprise if you just go back a week or two. I don't. Sure. I think the outcomes, the results were fairly consistent. They were pretty close to what the polls were saying that they would be. Nevertheless, it's hard data that reflects dominance, at least in New Hampshire.
Right.
Which might be more different on the Democratic side than the Republican side. You might see some of that, but dominance across a broad range of demographic groups, or at least age groups on the Democratic side.
What does that say about the mood of voters right now?
Oh, it says a lot about the mood of voters, and I think there's some parallels. I think what both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have done, they've been able to channel, almost maybe even reflect in terms of what voters want to see in the mirror, what they think is wrong with the country.
Right.
Now there is a little bit of overlap with respect to just this general anger at the status quo and business as usual and the powers that be, however you define them. But the vision certainly of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, when they get down to the details of what's wrong with America and what do we have to do differently, very, very different. But voters, I think, are disillusioned and they're angry. And these two candidates are telling them what they want to hear in terms of diagnosing the problems. The solutions appear a little simplistic to me on both sides, but the voters are eating it up right now, and they're doing well.
So a big boost for both Sanders and Trump coming out of New Hampshire here. One thing that primary didn't do was clear up this muddle over the establishment lane in the Republican Party. Going into New Hampshire, it looked like Florida Senator Marco Rubio was pretty strong. He performed well in Iowa. Jeb Bush was kind of on life support, and then Bush ends up placing above Rubio in New Hampshire. How significant is this? How much life does Bush have in him at this point? And how significant, how big of a setback is this for Rubio, how he did in New Hampshire?
It's a pretty big setback, and for some of the reasons that Iowa was helpful to him in that he overperformed considerably expectations. Sure. And then within the span of a week, he underperformed woefully the expectations in New Hampshire. Going forward, two of the biggest victors Cruz might have had a pretty good night in New Hampshire just because he didn't spend much money there. He finished a respectable third. Right. And I think that both the consensus candidate for the establishment or some bridge candidate that can unify the base for the Republican Party with the establishment wing of the party, that all got blown up in New Hampshire. Right. And so beyond Fiorina and Christie, who I didn't think either one of them were very viable, there's still a lot of folks left. So Rubio's not done, but now Kasich has a little bit of momentum, but we're not sure if he's really going to be able to finance his way all the way through Ohio. Jeb did a little bit better than we thought, so he's moving back. He didn't have a bad night in New Hampshire, and so if he can maintain his momentum and continue to slightly outperform expectations, if Rubio crumbles and Rubio really performs poorly in the next couple of states leading into the March 1st Super Tuesday, Butch could re-seize that mantle. It's certainly possible that he could be the one that begins to move. I still think it's going to take a while for Bush, for people to take another look at him and warm up to him. It's not going to be like they discover him overnight. But he's still breathing. He's on life support, but he's still breathing.
So these next few primaries could be pretty critical into sorting this out. You have Bush, Rubio, Ohio Governor John Kasich, who are still fighting over this establishment lane in the party. Meanwhile, you have Trump and Cruz who are really duking it out at the top, and these next few primaries set up pretty well. There's southern primaries in South Carolina and beyond, and Cruz and Trump, their brand of politics, people think that will play well there. How likely is it that one of those two goes on a run, and while the establishment candidates are trying to coalesce or sort that out, that they go on a run and wrap up this nomination fight before they can really get somebody in the
I think
Senate
that
race?
scenario is as probable as any other. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion.
Right.
It certainly can unfold that way. The reason that I wouldn't wager too much on that scenario is once we hit March 15, we then turn to winner-take-all primaries.
Right.
So even though I think both Cruz and Trump are probably going to perform very well between now and the Florida primary, their delegate leads are not really going to, they're not going to put that much distance between themselves and other candidates. The financing and sort of the confidence level that the broader party and the electorate has, a candidate has to have some momentum. But if they do, and you get a Rubio or a Bush that wins Florida, which would be possible, then certainly there's plenty of time after that, if the money's there, for you to switch out west and up into the northern central part of the country in the northeast, where a more moderate candidate could overtake either Cruz or Bush.
So Florida could really bring one of these candidates back. Lastly, Donald Trump, coming off of his big New Hampshire victory, is going to be here in Florida tomorrow at a rally in Tampa. Trump's been paying more attention to Florida than a lot of these other candidates. Is that a smart move on his part?
Absolutely. I'd be paying attention to Florida. Florida, for a number of reasons, we knew it was going to be important, but I think it'll be very important. I think a number of candidates will still be in the race. Florida's a big operation. The time is worth it. And so Trump's been working it here. Our homegrown candidates certainly haven't forgotten Florida, but Cruz has been mysteriously absent in a very, very important state.
And Trump seems to be trying to neutralize that home state advantage that either Bush or Rubio could have coming in here.
Oh yeah, he's working hard, and right now in the polls he still looks pretty good. He's like he's the person to beat on the Republican side.
Well, we'll see if that effort pays off. Professor, thank you very much for being here. We'll leave it at that. Thanks for joining us for Political Insider. Please come back for another edition next week.